This time on Poll Hub, so far, this summer's been pretty blue. As in Democratic blue. Statewide elections keep showing deep Democratic enthusiasm and worrying signs for Republicans. We're going to check back on how our Michigan poll did, picking the winners and the losers, and then we're going to chat with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Is he as confident as some commentators about the Democrats' chances? Will his team be able to stop Brett Kavanugh from being elevated to the Supreme Court? And what about his fellow New Yorker Donald Trump? Hey, what's the problem? Let's get started. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. My name is J.D. Dapper. I'm the Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Marigoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
Another Tuesday and another election. There are lots of primaries this summer in a lot of states. We polled Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota with NBC News a couple weeks back, and Michigan. I'll get one of those MI states. Michigan had their election, and we got it all right,
winners,
which is great. But more to the point, the numbers show a couple of trends that we wanted to talk about pretty briefly. The headliner here is John James, an African-American conservative Republican, won by 10 points over kind of the middle-of-the-road kind of Republican candidate, a businessman, and Donald Trump came out and endorsed him pretty late in the game and has taken credit for that. But we had him up before Donald Trump endorsed.
That's right. So the little causation here. We have to get the numbers in order in terms of what happens first, what happens second. We've seen that in other races as well. One of the things I thought that was interesting, these three states, of course, are the Midwest, and we're interested in the Midwest for obvious electoral reasons. In Michigan, this week, Democrat turnout was 7 points higher than Republican turnout. So you're hearing about enthusiasm. That's where it shows up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we saw in Michigan, too, that was very interesting is the fact that not only was, Democratic turnout up, but also Republican turnout was up as well.
Sure.
I mean, the Detroit Free Press was really talking about the fact that the turnout in this past Tuesday's election was the highest in their recent recording of election turnout since 1978. And I think, we see a lot of comparisons to 2018, to 2014, but I think we also need to kind of clock back to 2010 because the Democrats really need to have that kind of energy that the Republicans had back in 2010. And I think one of the things that was interesting, particularly in Michigan, is that when we look at turnout, Lee, you mentioned 7 points. So that translates into a couple of 100,000 voters more for Democratic candidates than for GOP candidates. But in 2010, what we saw was there were 2 votes for GOP candidates for every one for a Democratic candidate.
Well, the Democrats, as Jay indicated, are banking on just that kind of different interest level this time. And we did look down the road towards the general election and did see that this does look like the blue, at least at this point, is going to carry through to November as well. And we might just comment, a lot of our colleagues were polling in other states, and, the polls are always, a subject of much attention these days.
As we've discussed on the last 2 episodes of Poll Hub.
Yes, and
well,
polls,
especially when they don't come out so well.
That's right. But the polls had the narrative in Ohio 12, which got a lot of attention, and people who have been clocking in polls regularly are finding that this year the polls, pretty much spot on. So hopefully that will continue through Election Day.
And we're going to find out a lot more next week. Wisconsin, we polled Wisconsin, and there's some really interesting numbers we found in Wisconsin, and we're going to find out how those turn out when Wisconsinites, cheeseheads, do we call them that? Probably not. Well, they call themselves that. So anyway, they're going to the polls, and we'll check back, and we'll have that next week. We'll see exactly how our polls did there.
All right, so let's bring in New York's senior senator, minority leader in the Senate, and someone who has spent 44 years in public service. I thought I'd been teaching a long time, but that you even beat me on that. Chuck Schumer, thank you so much for joining our Poll Hub today. You're also a frequent visitor to Marist College, so you are definitely here, there, and everywhere. But thank you and welcome.
It's great to be on. It's great to be on with you, Lee. I love Marist, and you guys do a great job.
I appreciate that very much. So let's talk a little politics.
Politics? Are you kidding?
Yeah, a lot of special elections been going on for quite some time. Democrats been doing well. In the latest Marist poll, which we did with NPR and the PBS NewsHour, the generic question. 7-point advantage for the Democrats. So as you're looking ahead to the midterm elections, which are now, I guess, about 90 days away, how confident are you about reclaiming the majority in the Senate?
Well, I'd say this. It's very close. The conventional wisdom is behind the reality here. The conventional wisdom is, it's next to impossible. They have 25 seats up, many of them in deeply red states. The Republicans only have 8 states. That's true when you look at the whole macro picture. But if you look at what's happening state by state, we're doing very well. I'd say it's neck and neck right now. We are doing much better in states than people would ever imagine. The public polling shows that. The private polling, which I'm not allowed to talk about publicly, mirrors that even a little better. And I would say that it's real close, real close. I think we'll pick up more seats than people think. And I don't know if we'll lose any, but we'll lose fewer seats than people think. And we may not lose any.
Yep. Of course, a lot of attention is focused on the 10 red states that Trump carried and that you have to defend. And you're looking at individual races there. Are there any that are particularly worrisome to you at this point?
Well, look, you got to worry about a whole lot of races, but I'll make a couple of generic comments that apply to the races. It is surprising, and maybe you have some information, polling information on this. In the Middle West, Trump is doing much more poorly than he did in the elections. In other words, if you look at his numbers in the Great Plains or in the South, they're down from what they were in the elections, but pretty close. In the Middle West, around the Great Lakes and elsewhere, they're really considerably lower. It's hard to figure out if that is suburban voters, such as we saw in the election last night, the special election, blue-collar voters who may like some of the things Trump says, but those who voted for change are not getting the change they had hoped, or a combination of both. But something is happening there, something significant.
Yeah, and there's an enthusiasm gap that we've seen in our polls. We've done 3 with NBC recently in the areas you're talking about, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and we saw the president's approval rating around 40 or less.
And it goes beyond those. Yeah, it goes to just about every one of the Midwestern states. Even in a state like Indiana, where that's probably the most Republican of those Midwestern states, Trump's numbers are about even.
Yeah, but we see also a lot of passion on a lot of different issues. One in particular is abortion. Our NPR Marist poll shows a strong consensus in support of Roe v. Wade, although most Americans agree that there needs to be significant restrictions beyond 3 months of pregnancy. But when we ask about Trump's nomination of Brett Kavanugh, and the balance, the balance in the Supreme Court doesn't resonate as a motivating factor for many voters, especially voters that we see who may be leaning Democrat and are under 30. Is there a disconnect between Americans' views on abortion, the Supreme Court, and even the Democratic Party, or do you see it as just a messaging problem for the party?
Well, I think what it is people, we've had Roe for so long, and it's been so much the part and fabric of American life, that people think, well, no matter who's on the court, it'll pretty much stay where it is. I don't think that's accurate. As you know, Trump chose his 25, he chose from a list of 25 culled by 2 groups. One, the Heritage Foundation, whose goal in life has been to shrink government, particularly in health care. So that's going to have real effect on health care rights to people and health care
which is an important issue for Democrats.
Yeah.
And the other is by the Federalist Society, and Leonard Leo, the head of the Federalist Society, and a very effective man, unfortunately in my view, but his goal in life is to repeal Roe v. Wade. And we are making that message. I think, frankly, the senators realize that better than the public at this point.
That's interesting.
But I think we have to keep making that message, doing that message over and over and over again. On health care, on just one other point, Lee, on health care, I think people realize a little more that their rights are at stake because there's been attempts to take that away as recently as a year ago.
Yes.
And particularly on pre-existing conditions. I mean, that is
Yes,
certainly
where the Trump administration went to court, joined by a whole bunch of attorneys general, some of whom are running for office, running for the Senate this year, saying that it's not, get rid of the protection for pre-existing conditions. I will tell you this, throughout our states, whether they be the reddest or the bluest, and everything in between, healthcare is the dominant issue. It's more dominant than immigration. It's more dominant than the tax cuts. It's more dominant than anything else.
Interesting.
Well,
I think
just
we're
one
gonna see
other
a lot of
point,
it,
just
yeah.
one other question, though, on the issue of Kavanaugh. You've been very successful keeping Democrats in the Senate voting really as a bloc. But what are the expectations for some of these red state Democrats that, Lee was talking about and you guys were talking about, Democrats that are up for re-election?
Yeah, many Democrats have come out against Kavanaugh. The reddest state Democrats have said they've said they want to hear what he has to say. They want to look at the documents that are available. I think most of them believe that we should have more documents. I think even some of the Republicans believe that. And they want to hear what he has to say at the hearings. My view is this: if both the Senate and the American people become convinced that the nomination of Kavanaugh will cut back on health care dramatically, will cut back on women's freedom and women's health care in particular, that he'll lose. But we still have to continue to make that argument. It's, as I said, because Roe and because most people believe, well, the court won't really change anything. I don't believe that's the case, but I think a lot of people believe it.
Senator, I want to ask you about Donald Trump. He's somebody that's been in our orbit as New Yorkers for a very long time. You've known him, obviously. You've known him for a very long time as a congressman, as a senator, as a New Yorker. There was a lot of thought and talk when he first won that you and other New Yorkers might be able to get along with him because you know him. What's happened? I mean, what the heck happened there? Because he's not getting along with anybody in here.
Yeah, a couple of things have happened. First, on the issues, I said to him, he called me the day after he won, and I said, Mr. President-elect, you campaigned as a populist against both the Democratic and Republican establishments. He said things that a lot of Democrats didn't agree with, but he said things that a lot of Republicans didn't agree with. I said, if you continue to govern that way, there are going to be things we work on together. One of the things he talked about was a huge infrastructure bill. Well, we Democrats want that. And I suggested to him that be the first thing we do because we could start off on a bipartisan basis. What Trump did instead is he did a 180-degree turnaround from what he campaigned on and just was embraced in turn the hard right on the judges, which I just mentioned, but on issue after issue. Pence moved him in that direction. He appointed Mulvaney head of OMB, who is one of the 10 probably most extreme congressmen in cutting the budget, in taking away services that middle-class people and people aspiring to the middle class wish to be in. So he moved way over to the right. If he had campaigned on how he's governing, he never would have got elected. And I don't know if he realizes that after 2018, when I think the elections will give him a little bit of a wake-up call, if nothing, maybe more. I think he may change.
Do you think you have a chance to get that relationship back in 2018 that you have with him, or that you had with him? Or there any of us, any New Yorker did?
I don't think Trump has a personal ideology on most issues. I think he does what he thinks is good for him, and he doesn't really have much conviction on these issues. There are a few maybe he does. And I think that if he loses the House and then the Senate, he may say to himself, oh boy, the path I went on is wrong, and maybe I ought to work with the Democrats on things, particularly since we'd be in the majority. And so, yes, I think that's a possibility, but with Donald Trump, you never know. The other thing that's happened is...
You never know.
The other thing that's happened, in addition, we all knew he had some character traits that were not very admirable. No fidelity to the truth, a bullying, a ego that's enormous, and as president, it's gotten much, much worse. So that lots of Republicans are very uncomfortable with Trump, even if they agree with him on a bunch of the issues, because he's done real damage to the American character. We have never had a president who has behaved the way Donald Trump has. Just the idea that any time there's a fact that he doesn't agree with, he probably, he says it's fake. And if we don't have a common fact base, the founding fathers put this country together based on facts. And then they thought people would go to either town hall meetings or legislatures, Congress, and debate their disagreement on the issues, but with a common set of facts. And through most of the history of this grand republic, we've had that. And Trump is really eating away at that. So the bottom line is, that's where he's been disappointing, both on the substance and on character. He has shown such low and weak character that it's hurt America. I shudder that 10 or 15-year-olds may think that this is the norm. And I say to some of my very Republican friends who might agree with him on issues, particularly, working class people, if this guy were in your high school class, you'd dislike him. You'd dislike that he's not a team player. You'd dislike that he's a total egomaniac. You'd probably even dislike that he picked on the weakest kid in the class. So how do you like him now?
But he's also, what you point to as well is he's really, not him particularly, but I think he is part of what we have been seeing in an erosion of trust of government, an erosion of trust of the parties, of the media, of most institutions,
Even
in the
pollsters.
country. Well, I'm not sure how high pollsters were to start. But, one of the things that really leads to that
And
is
by the
we
way,
have
it's
asked
true.
about...
Barbara, I just want to say, it was there before he was there. He has made it much,
Absolutely.
much, much worse. The idea that he just prevaricates or changes his mind or is political in a nasty way, just like other presidents were, is not true. They had done some of it. He's turned it into an art form.
But what we're seeing as we come to the midterms is a lot of Americans, a majority of Americans, in fact, feel that Russia will interfere in the midterm elections. And I think there is a sense that there's concern about whether the elections will be fair, whether votes will be counted. Do you have concerns about that?
Absolutely. We were able, I sort of spearheaded this, and I got a lot of help from people like Amy Klobuchar and Chris Coons, Mark Warner. But we pushed very hard in the previous budget. We put in $380 million to go to the states to protect their electoral systems from that. There are two types of Russian interference, from that type of Russian interference, actually manipulating the machines. That money the states are using quite well and quite quickly.
Is that the main concern?
Well, there are
that
two.
There will be a hack of the vote?
There are two, that they would interfere in ways of the machines. We tried just in the most recent budget bill we're debating now to add another $250. It was blocked by our Republican colleagues, which I found very confounding.
Although the initial funding wasn't spent either.
The other is the manipulation of the media, with the with the RT and the fake news and all of that.
Misinformation.
Now, misinformation. That is harder for the government to combat. I do believe some of the social media people were caught totally surprised by how much the Russians did it and the effect it had in 2016. As you saw, Facebook took down a whole bunch of websites and all of that were IRA-like, the IRA being the old Russian group that did it in 2016, or one of them. And I think our social media people will be more aware of it. Now, the Russians may be learning...
But is it an issue of free speech?
Well, no, I don't think it's an issue of free speech. Foreigners have never been allowed to interfere in our elections, okay? It's different when Americans say it, but when a Russian does it and manipulates, and then they don't just, it's not just free speech, they set up hundreds of fake accounts that just sort of bounce these things around amongst one another, and they rise to a certain level of usage that then they are sent to everyone else. I think the social media people realize that and are trying to get rid of the fake accounts and these arbitrary ways to inflate how important these fake accounts are, because they come up with, fake news, fake websites, and bounce them around, bots, things like that.
So, Senator, if we come full circle now back to where we started, and let's say there are more revelations and the Democrats, continue to have that enthusiasm difference, and the House turns and the Democrats carry it, and you become majority leader, do you think you'll be overseeing an impeachment trial?
Well, we don't know what Mueller's going to say. I haven't said yes, I haven't said no. I said it depends on what Mueller comes up with, and I think that's all you can say about it.
Do you think it's a good thing for the party to be running on impeachment?
Well, I think it's a bad thing for the leaders of the House and Senate to say we're going to impeach Trump before we know what's happening. There's a lot of members of the party who have come to their own conclusions, but we as a first, the House is sort of a grand jury and the Senate is a jury, have to be a little. The Supreme Court, I focused on this a little. I just want to make one more point on Supreme Court. The whole ball of wax in the Supreme Court, as I said, will be, whether Collins and or Murkowski come along. Even if we get all the Democrats, we have to get them. And that's where the focus ought to be. And that's where most of the Democratic groups are focusing right now. That's important. I think that's an important point to make. I don't know if I made it as clear as I wanted
Senator,
to.
I know you appreciate you getting to join us today. I do want to make one closing quick comment, and then Barb's going to wrap it up. But, you started in politics when you were 24, serving in public service. I know you come to a lot of Marist graduations and other graduations around the state. Is this about a statement of youth? Are you really identifying with the millennials?
I love those
I wish I could.
Well, I love those graduations. I just love them. I love talking to the kids and hopefully giving them a little bit of inspiration. And I also believe in being accessible is important, so that's why I do it.
Okay, and we appreciate you having us here.
Well, we very much appreciate you joining with us, and we hope to see you on campus at graduation, if not before, Senator.
Oh, yeah, I love Marist. It's a great place. Thanks.
Well, that was certainly a very interesting discussion. I think we will be having quite an interesting time in this midterm election. We really want to thank Senator Schumer again for joining us as he was on the road around the state today. And that will do it, though, for this edition of Poll Hub. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. I'd like to thank Mary Griffith, who put all of this together, our executive producer, who keeps us all on track.
And we'd also like to thank the Roper Center Archives at Cornell University. We check them regularly, as should you. They provide us the ability to look back in time at different survey questions, results over the decades, and we even use them in class at Marist College.
And you can send your questions to pollhub@marist.edu, also on social media. That's the best way to really reach us. We monitor it all the time. Reach out. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter and Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram. Most of all, we say it every week, but I always like to remind you, look down at the device you are listening to this podcast on. There is a subscribe button. Tap it. We love you to subscribe. That way you know when the next episode comes out, and we're out every week. We haven't missed a week yet.
But Jay, there's someone sitting to your right.
Yeah, we have a new member of the Poll Hub team.
So Kenny, wheel over to the mic.
Oh, this is your moment.
So Kenny set this whole studio up today, which was more complicated because we had Senator Schumer in via wild technology, and will be an assistant producing kind of, because he's going to be editing some of these podcasts. Do you have anything to say for yourself, Ken?
I'm definitely looking forward to this great opportunity, and I thought that the Schumer interview went terrifically.
Oh, well, so he's got
All right, he's a fan already. Have you subscribed?
Yeah, have you subscribed?
Already subscribed. I'm editing it.
Yeah, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, he's subscribed. We actually just beam it into his brain. So well, thank you, Kenny. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you back here next week on Poll Up.